Okay, so right off the top, the war in Iran, as we look at this map here that really punctuates what we're about to tell you. At this hour, the world exists in what the president calls an indefinite ceasefire. It came just hours after he threatened to bomb Iranian infrastructure such as bridges and utilities. Because of this, it's a pressure cooker. Tensions remain. Iran fired on at least 3 ships in the Strait of Hormuz and claimed seizing 2 other ships. That means Iran's chokehold on that critical fuel passageway continues today at this hour to disrupt world fuel supplies. President Trump announced that ceasefire in this social media post last night, saying the government of Iran is seriously fractured. We've been asked to hold our attack on the country of Iran until such time as their leaders and representatives can come up with a unified proposal. Well, team coverage now. CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata is live in Tel Aviv, Israel. But let's go ahead and start with CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand. Natalie, ceasefire, yes. Extension, yes. But do these new developments really put all of that on a bubble at this hour?
Yeah, Reed, we just don't know when the second round of in-person negotiations between the U.S. and Iran could happen. You know, the president in that post late yesterday afternoon acknowledged that Iran's government is fractured, he said in that post. And, you know, regional experts have been talking about kind of tensions between the hardliners within the regime and the current government apparatus and also those who might be more moderate. So that's contributing to the challenges of getting together what the president calls a unified proposal. That's something that the administration is waiting for, but they haven't put a timeline on how long the president is willing to wait. Now, the New York Post earlier today reported that Pakistani officials were saying maybe something could happen in the next 36 to 72 hours. And the New York Post asked President Trump about that, and reportedly he said it's possible over text message to the New York Post. Read.
Well, the president also monitoring message from leaders in the Middle East. What is he hearing and what is the reaction there at the White House?
So we know Pakistan, of course, has been the key mediator in all of this, and we know that Pakistan's government officials say the outreach continues to both sides, to the U.S., of course, and also the Iranians. The prime minister, who's been a key figure, put out a social media post saying, thanking President Trump for the extended ceasefire and saying that he sincerely hopes both sides will continue to observe the ceasefire and eventually, you know, be able to reach a deal during a second round of scheduled talks in Islamabad. We just, again, don't have the date for that. And we are also still waiting to hear from the White House regarding Iran seizing these 2 ships in the Strait of Hormuz. We have not seen a statement yet from the president nor from White House officials. We've also been tracking, you know, reaction out of Iran, people of Iran, and what they're saying. The Associated Press managed to speak to a couple of residents in Tehran expressing the deep uncertainty, you know, going to bed and not knowing whether that they were going to wake up to bombings or war continuing. One person said the way things currently are, one just doesn't know what to do. Meanwhile, other residents who might be more supportive of the regime are calling on their officials to, quote, stand firm and unyielding. Obviously, a variety of perspectives inside Iran as well, Reed.
Natalie Brand at the White House with that picture. Thank you so much. So now let's turn to CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata. He is live in Tel Aviv, Israel. So, Charlie, what can you tell us about those attacks in the Strait of Hormuz? And really, could we see a larger U.S. military response?
Yeah, Reed, so we first heard from a British maritime security group this morning about Iranian gunboats opening fire on 3 passing ships. And then we got confirmation from Iran's Revolutionary Guards that they not only fired on 2 ships, but also seized those vessels, saying that they were operating without required authorization. They were seized in the Strait of Hormuz, and one of them reportedly suffered damage to its bridge from gunfire and rocket-propelled grenades. And of course, this follows, as we've reported, the U.S. capture of an Iranian-flagged ship earlier this week. And as you said, it raises the stakes over the ceasefire that was supposed to be in place today, supposed to run out anyway, but was extended indefinitely overnight by President Trump. And I think we have to keep remembering, worth noting, that the ceasefire is not just between the U.S. and Iran, but Israel and Iran too.
Well, and Charlie, we know that every story needs to have high stakes and deep need, and definitely the stakes are high, the needs are deep for all players. Take us through the military buildup in the region, because that only adds to both of those elements. We understand 1,000 more troops are on the way?
Yeah, so Reed, we have been reporting for a couple of days now that there has not been a sort of de-escalation here, even with the ceasefire. When I spoke to Central Command in charge of this region, as you know, I said, what does the ceasefire mean? They said rearm, reposition, and maybe for some of those forces to sort of regather themselves, considering the intensity, the tempo of this fight. But what's important here is we're now looking at 3 aircraft carriers or carrier strike groups that are either in this region or on the way, notably the Ford, the Gerald R. Ford, because we talked about this before. This has been on deployment since June. It was in the Caribbean, the Maduro raid, all of that.
Right.
This is the same aircraft carrier. It has been plagued with issues about, plumbing issues. There was a fire in the laundry department. It's not only, it was out in European Command, EUCOM, in the Mediterranean. We learned that it has turned back. It's now in the Red Sea, which makes it relevant to what is about to unfold or what they're preparing for. In addition to that, the George H.W. Bush is also on the way there, or here. So you've got the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, which is the centerpiece of that blockade just south of the Strait of Hormuz, which is putting that blockade in place for the U.S. military. And then you've got the Ford and the Bush that are also becoming part of whatever may unfold. And the reason we talk about all of this, we talk about the Ford U.S. military posture, is while these diplomatic back and forth may be going on, the U.S. military is preparing for the repercussions or what may happen after that. And they are fully forward. In fact, in a way, in terms of the assets here with 3 carrier groups and squadrons of F-18s, F-35s, F-22s here in Israel and at Al Udeid, they are as forward postured as they have ever been since this conflict began.
All of this playing out, of course, in the midst of that ceasefire extension between the U.S. and Iran. But then when we talk about ceasefires in that region, we also have to really drill down and look at the ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel. Where do things stand on that?
Well, Reed, that's really important because we haven't really reported a lot about the other fight that's been going on between Israel and Lebanon, because the Israelis have got a sort of agreement adjacent to the U.S. with Iran. But the fighting with Hezbollah in Lebanon, that continued for a few days after that. Now, I guess it was about a week ago, losing track of time, the Israelis had come to an agreement with Lebanon for a ceasefire. The Israelis weren't fighting with Lebanon. This is an agreement that the Lebanese government would try to rein in Hezbollah. And I can tell you, it has been holding, because we have been here. We were here when the ceasefire began between the U.S., Israel, and Iran. We didn't see as many air raid sirens or as much incoming here. But in northern Israel, that fight was still happening with Hezbollah. So that continued. They were taking incoming rockets and missiles. So when they pressed pause on that, largely it has held. The Israelis have said that Hezbollah has fired some rockets into northern Israel. But where there is a sticking point, because this has not been resolved, a ceasefire doesn't mean any sort of resolution, right? This isn't a peace agreement by any means. The Israelis still hold a part of territory in southern Lebanon. They say they're not going to let that go. And this is adjacent because the Iranians have said they'll open the strait, which they did for a short time, because of the agreement with Lebanon and Israel. So this is a sort of multi-layered, very complex situation, and each of them has an impact on the other one, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Charlie D'Agata in Tel Aviv, live for us tonight. Please be well and be safe. Thank you so much for your reporting.